somewhere between the chaos of modern cities and the silence people secretly crave, there is a country that almost feels unreal. A place where mornings begin with the smell of fresh coffee drifting through narrow alleyways, where old men quietly play chess beneath ancient trees, where the sound of motorbikes somehow becomes music instead of noise. A country where life moves fast, yet people still know how to sit still. Many foreigners arrive in Vietnam for a few weeks, and somehow they never really leave. Because Vietnam is not just a destination, it's an emotional escape. It's the feeling of warm rain hitting your skin in a tropical evening, the feeling of eating dinner on a tiny plastic chair while strangers smile at you like old friends, the feeling that maybe life was never supposed to be as complicated as the world made it, and perhaps the strangest part of all. The more you explore Vietnam, the more you begin questioning the life you came from. For decades, Vietnam existed quietly in the shadow of Asia's giants. People talked about Japan, China, Thailand, Singapore. But somewhere between misty mountains, glowing lantern streets, chaotic markets, and endless coastlines, Vietnam slowly became one of the most fascinating countries on Earth. Not because it is perfect, but because it feels alive, real, human, unfiltered. And for millions of foreigners searching for freedom, affordability, beauty, peace, adventure, or simply a second chance at life, Vietnam has become Asia's hidden paradise. The first thing many visitors notice is not the beauty, it's the energy. Vietnam feels awake. From the moment the sun rises, streets begin breathing with movement. Women carrying baskets of fruit. Scooters flowing like rivers through intersections. Tiny cafes already full before dawn. Street vendors preparing soup that has been cooked for hours before most people even open their eyes. In cities like Ho Chi Minh City and Hanoi, life spills onto the sidewalks. Nothing feels hidden indoors. People eat outside, talk outside, laugh outside, live outside. And strangely, instead of feeling stressful, it often feels deeply human. In many modern countries, life has become isolated. People move between apartments, offices, cars, and screens. Entire days pass without real human interaction. But Vietnam still feels connected to the street, connected to community, connected to presence. A simple walk through a Vietnamese neighborhood can feel more emotionally alive than an entire month in some wealthy cities. And then there's the rhythm. At first, the traffic looks terrifying. Millions of scooters, noisy intersections, a constant wave of motion. But after a few days, your brain adjusts. You stop resisting the flow. And suddenly, what once looked chaotic begins to feel strangely harmonious. There is an unwritten understanding between people, a silent choreography, a collective awareness. It becomes almost philosophical. Vietnam teaches you that control is sometimes an illusion. Flow matters more. The country stretches across more than 3,000 kilometers of coastline, shaped like a long dragon beside the South China Sea. Around 100 million people live here, making Vietnam one of the most populated countries in the world. But despite its density, so much of the country still feels open, green, and untouched. One moment you are inside a crowded city filled with neon lights and rooftop bars. A few hours later, you are surrounded by rice fields moving softly beneath the wind. Vietnam changes constantly. That is part of its magic. In the north, mountains disappear into clouds. Villages cling to cliffsides. The air becomes cool and mysterious. In places like Sapa, the mornings arrive wrapped in fog. Terraced rice fields curve across mountains like giant stairways built by nature itself. Life there feels slower, older. Buffalo walk beside narrow roads. Children wave at passing travelers. Women in traditional clothing sell handmade fabrics in mountain markets. And at night, silence covers the valley so completely that you can hear the insects singing in the darkness. For many foreigners, these northern landscapes feel almost dreamlike, especially those coming from crowded urban societies where nature has slowly disappeared behind concrete. But Vietnam is not only mountains. Further south, the atmosphere transforms completely. The central coastline is filled with golden beaches, fishing villages, tropical heat, and glowing sunsets. In Da Nang, modern cafes stand beside endless ocean views. In Hoi An, ancient yellow buildings glow beneath lantern light every evening, creating one of the most romantic atmospheres in Asia. At night, the river reflects hundreds of floating lanterns. Tourists walk slowly through the old streets. Musicians play softly nearby. The scent of grilled seafood fills the warm air. And for a moment, time itself seems to slow down. This is one reason Vietnam affects people emotionally. It constantly shifts between excitement and peace, between intensity and calm, between movement and stillness. Few countries create this emotional contrast so naturally. And then there's the food. In Vietnam, food is not just survival. It is memory, identity, family, daily ritual. Even a simple bowl of pheo feels layered with history. Steam rises into the humid morning air. Fresh herbs cover the table. Lime, chili, fish sauce, slow-cooked broth. Everything feels balanced. Vietnamese cuisine is famous not because it is expensive, but because it feels alive. Fresh ingredients, bright flavors, complex textures. Meals often happen on sidewalks surrounded by strangers, scooters, laughter, and city noise. And somehow, those become the meals people remember forever. Foreigners are often shocked by how affordable life can feel here. A delicious street meal might cost less than a coffee in Europe. Luxury apartments in modern districts can cost a fraction of prices in cities like London, New York, or Dubai. High-speed internet is widely available. Cafes stay open late. Delivery services move incredibly fast. For digital nomads, remote workers, retirees, and travelers searching for freedom, Vietnam increasingly feels like a hidden loophole in the modern world, a place where life still feels financially possible. And that matters more than ever, because across much of the world, people are exhausted. Housing costs keep rising. Work pressure keeps growing. Loneliness spreads quietly through modern societies. Many people no longer dream about becoming rich. They simply dream about breathing again. Vietnam offers that feeling to many outsiders, not luxury in the traditional sense, but freedom. The freedom to slow down, to eat well, to walk outside at midnight safely, to spend time with people instead of constantly chasing survival. Of course, Vietnam is not a fantasy world. Life here also comes with challenges. The tropical heat can feel overwhelming. Air pollution sometimes blankets major cities. Flooding during rainy seasons can disrupt entire neighborhoods. Traffic accidents remain a serious issue. Bureaucracy can frustrate foreigners unfamiliar with local systems. And culturally, Vietnam can feel emotionally complex, because beneath the smiles and hospitality lies a society shaped by generations of hardship, war, sacrifice, and survival. Older generations still carry memories of conflict. Vietnam's modern identity was forged through decades of colonialism, war, division, and reconstruction. And perhaps because of that history, there is a quiet resilience in the people, a strength that visitors often feel immediately. Vietnamese people are frequently described by foreigners as warm, hard-working, resilient, family-oriented, and remarkably adaptable. Family remains central to life here. Grandparents often live close to children and grandchildren. Meals are shared together. Parents sacrifice deeply for education and stability. Education itself is taken very seriously in Vietnam. Students often study long hours. Parents invest heavily in their children's future. And despite being a developing country, Vietnam consistently surprises the world with strong educational performance and rapidly growing industries. Over the past few decades, The country has transformed economically at astonishing speed. Factories expanded. Technology industries grew. International investment poured in. Today, Vietnam has become one of Southeast Asia's fastest-growing economies. Global brands manufacture products here. Modern skyscrapers rise above old neighborhoods. Luxury malls stand beside traditional wet markets. And yet, Vietnam somehow still retains much of its soul. That balance is rare. Many rapidly developing countries lose their cultural identity beneath modernization. But Vietnam still feels unmistakably Vietnamese. Morning coffee culture remains sacred. Tiny street restaurants still dominate local life. Traditional holidays still bring entire families together. And nowhere is that emotional spirit more visible than during Tet, the Vietnamese Lunar New Year. During Tet, cities empty as millions return to their hometowns. Families clean homes, prepare food, honor ancestors, and reconnect with loved ones. The atmosphere becomes deeply emotional. Flowers cover the streets. Children wear new clothes. Homes glow with warm lights and red decorations. For foreigners experiencing Tet for the first time, it often reveals something missing in modern life elsewhere. Community, a feeling that people still remember where they came from, and yet beneath all the beauty, there is also loneliness, especially for foreigners who stay too long, because paradise can become complicated. Some expats arrive imagining endless freedom, cheap living, constant adventure, but eventually reality settles in. Language barriers create isolation. Cultural differences become emotionally exhausting. Relationships can feel temporary. Friendships come and go as travelers continue moving across Asia, and sometimes the tropical dream begins feeling strangely empty. This happens more often than people admit, because escaping your country does not automatically mean escaping yourself. Vietnam can slow your life down, but it cannot fully silence the mind. Many long-term foreigners eventually discover that inner peace requires more than beautiful scenery. Still, Vietnam has a unique way of healing people, not dramatically, quietly, through ordinary moments. A woman handing you tea during rain, children laughing in an alleyway, an old couple exercising together beside a lake before sunrise. The smell of fresh bread mixing with motorcycle smoke in the early morning. Tiny moments. But together, they create a feeling many people have forgotten. The feeling of being present. And perhaps that explains why Vietnam leaves such a deep emotional imprint on travelers. Not because everything is perfect, but because life here still feels tangible, visible, human. When the sun begins disappearing behind the skyline of Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam transforms again. The heat softens. Neon lights flicker alive. Music slowly spills from rooftops, hidden bars, riverside lounges, and tiny street cafes filled with people who don't seem ready to go home yet. Night in Vietnam feels different from many places in the world. Not overly polished, not artificial, alive. The streets remain full long after midnight. Families still eat together outdoors. Young couples sit quietly beside lakes and rivers. Friends gather around seafood grills beneath hanging lights. Scooters continue flowing endlessly through the city like glowing rivers of motion. And everywhere, there's energy. In districts filled with nightlife, foreigners from every corner of the planet blend into the rhythm of the city. Backpackers, entrepreneurs, English teachers, digital nomads, retirees, people escaping winters, people escaping burnout, people escaping heartbreak. Vietnam has quietly become one of the world's great emotional crossroads, not because it is the richest country, not because it is the most luxurious, but because people arrive here searching for something deeper than money, a different way to live. And often, they find it in the smallest moments. A rooftop conversation during warm rain, late-night noodles shared with strangers, a silent motorbike ride through empty streets at 2 a.m. while the city glows beneath tropical mist. For many foreigners, Vietnam becomes less of a travel destination and more of a temporary home for the soul, especially along the coast. Vietnam's beaches remain surprisingly underrated compared to other Asian destinations. In places like Nha Trang, the ocean stretches endlessly beside growing modern skylines. Further south, islands scattered across turquoise water still feel hidden from the world. And then there is Phu Quoc, an island where palm trees lean toward white sand beaches, where fishing boats drift slowly at sunset, where tropical air carries the scent of salt, grilled seafood, and rain-soaked earth. At certain hours, especially just before dusk, Vietnam becomes almost painfully beautiful. Golden light reflects across the ocean. Children run barefoot beside the water. Couples sit silently facing the horizon. And for a brief moment, modern life feels very far away. This emotional contrast is one of Vietnam's greatest powers. The country can feel deeply peaceful, while simultaneously buzzing with unstoppable movement. You can spend an afternoon surrounded by complete silence in nature, and a few hours later find yourself inside one of Asia's most energetic cities. Very few countries offer this balance so naturally. For younger foreigners, Vietnam often represents freedom and reinvention, a place where they can afford time again, time to think, time to create, time to breathe. In many Western cities, people feel trapped inside cycles of rent, debt, schedules, and emotional exhaustion. But in Vietnam, life can suddenly feel manageable. A freelancer earning dollars or euros online may live surprisingly comfortably here. Cafes become offices, beach towns become creative refuges. Days feel slower, stress feels lighter. This is one reason Vietnam has become increasingly popular among remote workers and entrepreneurs. Especially after the world changed dramatically in recent years, people began questioning everything. Why live somewhere that makes you miserable? Why spend your entire life rushing? Why sacrifice health, freedom, relationships, and peace for systems that never truly satisfy? Vietnam quietly entered that global conversation, not loudly, but powerfully. At the same time, life here is not always easy for foreigners. Some eventually struggle with cultural adaptation. Vietnamese communication styles can feel indirect to outsiders. The language is extremely difficult for many foreigners to master. Noise levels in cities can become emotionally draining over time. Simple administrative tasks sometimes require patience far beyond what visitors expect. And emotionally, there can be distance. Vietnamese society is warm and welcoming, but also deeply rooted in family structures, social expectations, and cultural traditions that outsiders may never fully understand. Some foreigners spend years here while still feeling slightly outside the invisible circle of belonging. This creates a strange emotional paradox. Vietnam can feel incredibly comforting and incredibly lonely at the same time, especially for men. Many arrive searching for adventure, romance, or escape from isolated modern lives back home. And yes, relationships between foreigners and locals are common here. You'll often see couples walking through parks, sitting beside rivers, or sharing coffee in quiet cafes. Vietnamese women are frequently admired by foreigners for their elegance, softness, work ethic, fashion sense, and calm femininity. Many visitors notice how much care people put into appearance here. Fashion is important in Vietnam. Even ordinary streets often feel stylish. Young people follow global trends closely while still blending them with local identity. At night in cities like Da Nang or Ho Chi Minh City, entire neighborhoods become filled with beautifully dressed young people taking photos, drinking milk tea, listening to music, and enjoying the warm evening air. Vietnamese men are often seen as disciplined, hardworking, entrepreneurial, and socially resilient. Many work incredibly long hours to support family ambitions and future stability, and perhaps because Vietnam developed rapidly within a single generation, There exists a fascinating tension between traditional values and modern global influence. You can see it everywhere. Luxury cars parked beside street food stalls, teenagers wearing Korean-inspired fashion while grandparents burn incense at ancestral altars nearby. Massive skyscrapers rising above old colonial neighborhoods. Vietnam feels like two worlds existing simultaneously, the ancient and the modern, and that creates a unique cultural atmosphere unlike almost anywhere else in Asia. Geopolitically, Vietnam occupies a fascinating position. Bordered by China, connected historically to French colonialism, shaped heavily by war with the United States, and increasingly important in global manufacturing and trade, Vietnam has learned how to survive between powerful forces. Its history is filled with resistance, adaptation, and reinvention. And today, many global companies view Vietnam as one of the most strategically important economies in Southeast Asia. International tourism continues growing. Infrastructure expands rapidly. Metro systems are being developed. Airports become larger every year. Yet, despite modernization, Vietnam still feels deeply grounded in ordinary human life. People still sit outside together at night. That simple detail matters more than many realize. In much of the modern world, public social life is disappearing. People stay indoors, conversations move online, loneliness quietly spreads behind apartment walls. But in Vietnam, human presence still dominates daily life, especially after dark. You see elderly people dancing together in public parks, groups exercising beside lakes, street musicians performing for strangers, families eating together on sidewalks. The country still values togetherness in visible ways, and perhaps that explains why many visitors feel emotionally safe here. Vietnam is widely considered one of the safer countries in Southeast Asia for travelers. Violent crime against tourists remains relatively low. Women often walk comfortably at night in populated areas. Street life creates a constant sense of human presence. Of course, scams and petty theft exist like anywhere in the world. Tourists still need awareness and common sense. But emotionally, many travelers describe Vietnam as surprisingly comforting, especially solo travelers. There's almost always life happening around you. You are rarely truly alone. And yet, ironically, loneliness still exists everywhere beneath the surface, especially in modern cities. Young Vietnamese increasingly face intense pressure to succeed financially. Housing prices continue rising. Competition grows stronger. Social media creates unrealistic expectations. Long working hours leave many emotionally exhausted. Behind the smiling cafes and glowing city lights, many young people quietly struggle with anxiety about the future. This is not unique to Vietnam. It is part of modern life everywhere now. But perhaps because Vietnam still feels so vibrant externally, the hidden emotional weight becomes even more invisible. A country can appear joyful, while individuals quietly carry sadness inside. And maybe that is why Vietnam feels so emotionally powerful to outsiders. Because the country reflects something deeply human. Joy and hardship existing together. Beauty and exhaustion. Hope and uncertainty. Freedom and loneliness, all at once. There are moments in Vietnam that feel almost cinematic beyond explanation. Riding through mountain roads while clouds drift across valleys beneath you. Hearing distant karaoke echo through humid evening streets. Watching rainstorms arrive over the ocean. Drinking strong Vietnamese coffee alone while an entire city slowly wakes around you. And somewhere during these ordinary moments, people begin changing. Their priorities soften. Their nervous systems slow down. Their definition of success starts evolving. Vietnam has a strange ability to make modern ambition feel less important, not because achievement loses meaning, but because life itself suddenly feels richer, more textured, more sensory, more alive. And eventually, many travelers begin asking themselves difficult questions. Why did life back home feel emotionally numb? Why did happiness become so complicated? Why do some of the wealthiest societies also feel deeply lonely? Vietnam does not provide perfect answers, but it offers perspective. Here, happiness often appears in smaller forms: shared meals, morning walks, fresh fruit markets, conversations over coffee, watching the rain from a balcony while the city glows below. Simple things modern societies sometimes forgot how to value. And maybe that is the real reason Vietnam stays inside people long after they leave. Not because it is paradise, but because it reminds people of something modern life slowly erased: presence, connection, human warmth. In a world increasingly dominated by algorithms, speed, isolation, and digital noise, Vietnam still feels tangible. A place where people look at each other. A place where strangers still talk. A place where life still happens outside. And perhaps that is why so many foreigners arrive for a vacation, then quietly begin imagining a different future. Not necessarily richer, not necessarily easier, but slower, warmer, more meaningful. Because at the end of the day, most people are not truly searching for luxury. They are searching for peace, for belonging, for a life that feels real again. And somewhere between the lanterns of Hoi An, the mountains of Sa Pa, the sleepless energy of Ho Chi Minh City, and the quiet tropical sunsets of Phu Quoc, Vietnam whispers a dangerous idea into the hearts of travelers. Maybe life was never meant to be rushed. Maybe happiness was always hiding inside simpler things. And maybe the greatest luxury in the modern world is finally feeling alive.